Hello everyone, and welcome to the debrief video for the self-assessment surveys that you did for this course. In this video, you will find a description of all of the measures that are relevant to negotiations and how they influence how you approach a negotiation. You will have received a debrief sheet if you completed these surveys, so you can follow along and see where you scored. I'll also give you some scoring relative to other populations. I've been capturing this data for some time, so you can see where you fall relative to others. So let's get started. On your sheet, one of the first things you'll see is negotiation self-efficacy. You'll see two categories of self-efficacy: integrative self-efficacy and distributive self-efficacy. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about what self-efficacy is in general, and then we'll go into these two specific cases of self-efficacy. So at the top of the sheet here, you'll see negotiation self-efficacy, and self-efficacy, the term self-efficacy it comes from a theory called social cognitive theory that was founded by Dr. Albert Bandura, and he defines self-efficacy as one's belief in one's ability to succeed in specific situations or accomplish a task. So it's important to note that self-efficacy is actually task specific. It's our confidence in something. It's our confidence that we're able to accomplish something very particular. So I have self-efficacy for tennis. I have self-efficacy for riding a bike. I have self-efficacy for climbing a tree. And all of these self-efficacies differ. My confidence for all of these activities differs. And so I want to distinguish it from another concept that's sometimes confused with it, and that is the concept of self-esteem. It is not self-esteem. Self-esteem is a global concept. It's how you feel about yourself in your entirety, whether you're valuable, whether you're a good person. But this is really just about your abilities and your ability to do something very in particular. So negotiation self-efficacy would be your confidence level that you are able to negotiate. And it turns out that our self-efficacy for various tasks has enormous implications for how we develop in those areas, how we learn to do how we improve and develop over time, and also our performance, so the outcomes that we are able to achieve. In this particular self-assessment survey, I had you measure integrative self-efficacy and distributive self-efficacy. Integrative self-efficacy is our self-efficacy for value creation, the value creation part of a negotiation. How confident are you that you'll be able to do such things as find trade-offs that benefit both parties? Whereas distributive self-efficacy is our confidence in our ability to value claim, the part of the negotiation where you have to divide up the resources and be able to acquire the resources that you're entitled to, or that be able to claim as much value as possible. So how confident are you that you can persuade the other negotiator to make the most concessions? You can be confident high in one of these and low in the other. You can be high in both. As again, they're two different activities, so your self-efficacy in each is not related to one another. So in this chart here at the bottom, what you'll see is integrative self-efficacy and distributive self-efficacy, and you'll see a number of scores that are relevant to different groups. You'll see Schulich MBAs, because I have a colleague at Schulich with whom we collect these measures each year for both of our classes, so we have access to each other's information here. So you'll see Schulich MBAs, here are the averages. I also sometimes I'm able to do research with and work with managers, and I have like a few hundred managers in my database at this point. And here's the average across managers for their self-efficacy on these two behaviors. And then I have your peer group, the HRM undergraduates. Now I know many of you are not in HRM. Many of you might be in the BAS or in some other program entirely. However, these are the people who have taken 4490 with me in particular, and here are the averages in their self-efficacy. This includes your class group. I also think it's important or interesting to look across gender, because as we've noted in other parts of our course together, negotiation is a gendered behavior. We're socialized to behave in different ways, which leads to different types of outcomes and different types of behaviors within a negotiation. So you can see some differences here. So you want to look at your own self-efficacy for these tasks and see, are there areas where I'm more confident, areas where I'm less confident. Do I want to increase my confidence for any of these behaviors? And if you want to increase your confidence, there are lots of ways to do that, right? There's the practice that you're doing here. I'm hoping through the course of our time together in this course, your self-efficacy has improved or increased. It's also looking for good role models for people who are already strong negotiators, who you see as negotiating in a way that you would like to behave, and looking to them for examples and guidance on how to negotiate. And it could just be seeking feedback as well from people that you've negotiated with, or from other people in your environment, managers, people that you work with, and hearing what they have to say, your strengths are, and what you're doing particularly well, and also your weaknesses and what you need to work on. These are all ways to increase your negotiation self-efficacy. So let's see what some of the implications, according to the research, are on from our negotiation self-efficacy. Well, here's what we know. We know that self-efficacy scores tend to drive your initial choice of tactics. So as you enter a negotiation, you will choose to behave in a given way depending on where you feel more confident. Low levels of negotiation self-efficacy are correlated with higher risk-taking behaviors. So if you have low self-efficacy on both sides of both sides of the negotiation, the integrative portion and the distributive portion, you will be more likely to do things like reveal your BATNA or reveal your payoffs, make extreme opening offers, to do things that can be risky for you through the course of the negotiation. Higher integrative self-efficacy is correlated with objective value and reputation, positive reputational effects from having an integrative approach to negotiations. Higher distributive self-efficacy is correlated with objective value, but also with negative feelings about the negotiation process. Okay, so these are relative. When I say higher, it's higher integrative self-efficacy relative to distributive self-efficacy. So you also want to look at the relative weights of your distributive versus implicit integrative self-efficacy. All right, so here's the first item. In the same category at the top of your sheet, you have something called implicit negotiation beliefs. Implicit negotiation beliefs are simply whether or not you believe that negotiation skills can be learned, or whether you are born with them, right? You've heard this debate in other places. Are leaders born or made? Well, it is important. This becomes an important thing to understand, because what happens if you believe that negotiation skills are fixed, that you can't improve them? Well, it means that you make no movement in terms of this course, right? You don't, if you can't learn these skills, then what are you developing within the classroom? It also means that you'll make no efforts to continue to try and develop them after the course, or as you're working, or in other facets of life. If you believe that negotiation skills are malleable, if they can change over time, then you're more likely to make efforts to continue to develop yourself. So a sample item that you would have received for this particular scale is, all people can. How much do you agree with this statement? All people can change their most basic negotiation qualities. Do you agree or disagree? Agreement with this statement is a 5. So that means that if you have scored high on this dimension, then you believe that negotiation skills are malleable, that they can change over time. And here's an interesting pattern of results. Our Schulich MBAs actually believe that Schulich MBAs and HRM graduates have very similar responses to this, and they're a large portion of them that kind of see this as fixed. It's not as malleable as it should be. Whereas managers who've had some experience and been out there in the world and had a chance to test their skills actually do view these skills as malleable. So here's something to keep in mind. Negotiators who believe negotiation attributes are malleable, and we also call these incremental theorists, if you're looking for some language on how to describe this. These types of people, incremental theorists, believe that we can improve our skills. captured more of the bargaining surplus and were more integrative than those negotiators who believed negotiating attributes are fixed, entity theorists. So this is interesting, right? So this simple shift in belief, I believe I can improve my skills, leads you to capture more of the bargaining surplus and leads you to be more integrative. Whereas incremental theorists enjoy a tremendous performance advantage at the bargaining table relative to entity theorists. It becomes important then to understand that negotiating skills are malleable rather than fixed. Okay. So this next category of traits, or of traits, I suppose, is particularly important, or is particularly interesting to a lot of people. Interesting is the word I was looking for there. This is personality, the big five personality. You likely have studied this in other courses, particularly in OB if you took OB. And this is personality in the way that we commonly talk about it popularly, right? We talk about people having different personality traits and behaving in different ways. Personality, the definition of personality would be the way in which we behave, patterns in our behavior that we exhibit, especially when the environment allows us to behave as who we are. So there are certain environments that are weak environments where you walk in and you can be who you are. Your personality can shine. There are other environments that are fairly strong environments where your personality is stifled to some extent. That would be a place like a lecture hall, where it's pretty clear you need to sit in your seat and listen to the lecturer. You wouldn't say very much, so it's really hard to tell who's extroverted in that case, who's open in that case. But certainly, so personality really shines in weak environments, and negotiations is definitely a weak environment. Something interesting about personality is that it actually doesn't predict as much of negotiation outcomes or negotiation process as we would think it does. This is often the case with personality. Personality doesn't predict as many things as we think or popularly believe that it should. There are some things that are important here, but we'll go through each of them, and then I will highlight some findings that are most important. So you may already know a lot of these traits, but in the middle you'll see the trait description itself. So a bit of an example of some synonyms, some other ways in which you might describe that trait. And then you'll see what a low score looks like and what a high score looks like. So this is how you would read this chart. So somebody who is high on openness to experience, some other ways of describing that would be imaginative, feeling oriented, ideas oriented. A person who is high on openness to experience would be curious and have a wide range of interests and often be an independent thinker. Whereas somebody who's low on openness to experience would be practical, conventional, would prefer routine. Okay, let's just go down the line here. I know I'm reading this to you, and you can pause the video and just kind of read this for yourself and take a look, but I'll go through it quickly in order to make everything clear. The second is conscientious. This is somebody who is self-disciplined. This is the person who always submits things on time, who's following the guidelines, who's careful and detail-oriented. Somebody who's high on this is hardworking, dependable, and organized, whereas somebody who is low might be seen as impulsive or a bit disorganized. And then on extroversion, this one we all have a popular understanding of. This is someone who's very social, who likes to talk to people, who's trying to talk to everybody in the room, who doesn't mind standing up in front of a crowd, or maybe they do, but they certainly enjoy the presence of others, and they're grateful for the presence of others. This would translate into, on the high side, as somebody who is outgoing and warm and often seeking adventure, so seeking stimulation. On the low side, this would translate into somebody who is quiet and reserved. Then we have agreeableness. This is somebody who's trustworthy and good-natured and cooperative. On the high side, it would translate to somebody who's helpful and trusting and empathetic, who understands the feelings of others and is always thinking of how others might feel about something, is taking the perspective of others. On the low side, it would translate into somebody who is critical, uncooperative, suspicious. And then we have neuroticism, which I think has, it's a word that has strong meaning, but I want you to understand it as somebody who's simply has a tendency to be quite emotional and often anxious, right? So somebody who is a bit nervous in their tendencies. On a high score on this would be anxious, unhappy, prone to negative emotion, whereas a low score would be calm and even tempered and secure, right? So if you think through all of these things and think, well, what's likely to have an impact on negotiations? Well, it turns out the one where there's some promise for some association is conscientiousness. If somebody is a person who is going to take the time and effort to prepare, to do the research, then they have an opportunity to be more successful within the negotiation itself. So that one's a bit intuitive, but it's also interesting to see where you fall on these other elements of personality. All right, so let's move on to our political skill. And it turns out political skill is quite important within a networking framework. In your on your sheet, you'll have 4 different types of political skill. So in general, political skills refers to the ability to effectively understand others at work and to use the knowledge to influence others to act in ways that enhance one's personal or organizational objectives. So we'll go over each of these, and then as a group, I'll tell you what a political skill is related to. So at the beginning there, we have networking ability, and this is your ability to communicate effectively, to develop a good rapport with other people. In interpersonal influence, this would be called making people at ease around you, making people feel comfortable would go into interpersonal influence. And also getting people on side, getting people to see your point of view. Social astuteness would be about understanding people very well, understanding their motivations, being able to spot hidden agendas, being savvy about presenting yourself to others in a way that would be favorable to them. Apparent sincerity, it's being genuine with other people. People who are sincere or who appear to be sincere to others have the sense of authenticity about them. And it's because they are actively trying to be genuine in each interaction that they engage in. An item that you would have filled out for apparent sincerity, it is important that people believe I am sincere in what I say and do. All right, so these are 4 subcategories or subtraits that we take together to inform our political skill. And we know from the research that political skill positively relates to 3 important elements, those elements being value creation, value claiming, and negotiation reputation. Isn't that interesting? 3 things that we know are core to the skills we need to develop for the skills and the outcomes we need to develop within negotiations. So again, here's a place where your political skill, you can look at your own ratings and determine whether or not, and this is where I don't have comparators on this one, but you can determine whether or not you're in where you are on each of these items. Are there places where you want to improve your abilities, or are there places where you need to find, like where you already have strengths that you want to rely on within your negotiations? And here is one more that the last one that I want to go over with you. This is social value orientation. And this tells us what types of outcomes you're often aiming for, what types of outcomes are important to you within a negotiation. We know that people have different preferences, and some of their preferences are for outcomes that are fair and equal, where everybody benefits. And some people have preferences that are far more competitive, egocentric, one would say, where they want to win. And we've seen this through our course together. We've seen this through the class, that people have different preferences. So there's no upside or downside to each of these. They just are your preferences for the outcomes you value. Yeah, I imagine that you could see that one is more aligned with value creation, the other being more aligned with value claiming, right? Pro-social being more aligned with value creation, individualistic being more aligned with value claiming. So you want to just know what is motivating you and what is driving you. If across these items and these traits, if you tend to gravitate towards claiming, you'll want to ensure that you are balancing yourself out consciously during the negotiation to ensure that you are actively benefiting from the possibilities of value creation while still keeping an eye towards value claiming. As we've noted, these two skills are both important for negotiations. They're often competing, and skills that you need to have both of these in order to ultimately be successful within negotiations. Okay, so that is our debrief on our individual differences that you filled out at the beginning of the year. I hope this gave you something to think about and something that will help you as you start to consider, as we wind down the course, as you start to consider how you will continue your skill development in this area going forward. Thank you very much and take care.